Hey, how's it going, everybody? Hope all is well with you and yours. So, yesterday I posted a video about a cop shooting an unarmed kid in the courtroom, in the courthouse. And today, Ariana, there goes the bird. Let me close this door. Hold on. So Ariana sent me the officer's report on what happened that day. So I'm going to read you his report and comment in between here. So, statement of Deputy Richard Scarborough Jr., badge number 1188. This is the cop that shot the kid in the courthouse. The statement is regarding my involvement in an incident that occurred Wednesday, January 17, 2018 at approximately 12:40 p.m. I am making this statement voluntarily as part of the investigation regarding this matter. My date of hire with Franklin County Sheriff's Office is 12/3/2008. My regular assignment is with the Court Services Unit, Domestic Relations, Common Pleas. My regular duty hours are 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. with Saturdays and Sundays off. At the time of this incident, I was wearing my regular Franklin County deputy uniform with the Franklin County Sheriff's patches and badge. I was clearly identifiable as a Franklin County Sheriff's deputy. I was carrying my department approved 9mm Smith & Wesson M&P Model 9 semi-automatic pistol on my duty belt. I was current on my range qualifications with that weapon. I also had a department issued taser and a 5.5-inch fixed blade knife on my duty belt as well. I was not carrying any backup firearm. I was not under the influence of any medications that would impair the performance of my duties. I had not consumed alcohol in the 24-hour time period prior to the incident. I had not worked any special duty the day before this incident. I was wearing prescription eyeglasses, but they were knocked from my face when I was attacked during the incident. I do not wear a hearing aid, nor do I have any known problems with my hearing. I was well rested at the start of my shift. January 17, 2018, I began my regular shift at or before 8:30 a.m. That morning, I performed my regular duties, ensuring that inmates on the docket for domestic relation cases would be transported from the municipal court building holding cells to appear for court hearings in courtrooms on floors 3, 5, 6 of 373 South High Street, where deputies, including me, escort inmates to and from their scheduled hearings, handle paperwork, and provide courtroom and courthouse security at approximately 10:30 a.m. After these duties were completed, I proceeded to the 5th floor, where juvenile cases are handled by court magistrates in courtrooms 51 through 56. My duties there were to provide for security for the courtroom and the public areas. I was the only deputy on the 5th floor. At some point, I was called away from the 5th floor to help address a disturbance on the 3rd floor, but I returned to the 5th floor at around noon to continue my duties of providing security there. My office is located on the 5th floor, across from courtroom 56, Magistrate Larry Sanchez's courtroom. At around 12:30 p.m., I was standing in the doorway to my office. I saw a male, white, who I know to be Joseph Haynes, with a woman I assume to be his mother, and 2 other people who I assume to be his attorney and caseworker or probation officer. They were in the lobby area outside the courtroom, specifically in the area of the lobby outside the courtroom 55 and 56. Mr. Haynes appeared angry and agitated. He and his mother were arguing and cursing at one another, and possibly the attorney. Haynes was yelling, "This is BS, F you, I'm not doing that, I don't care what they say," or words to that effect. A short time later, Magistrate Sanchez's bailiff, who I know as Mike, came out of courtroom 56 and announced that Haynes' case was ready to proceed. At that point, Haynes, his mother, the attorney, the caseworker, a person I assumed was Haynes' grandmother, and possibly others, entered courtroom 56 from the lobby area. I waited a few minutes and then went into the courtroom to provide security in the event Mr. Haynes or his family continued to argue and create a disturbance in the courtroom. When I entered the courtroom, the proceedings had begun. Magistrate Sanchez was seated at the bench. When facing him, the table for the prosecution is on the left and the table for the defense is on the right. Mr. Haynes, his attorney, and his mother were all seated at the... Getting old here, so I gotta zoom. They were all seated at the defense table. There was one or possibly two prosecutors seated at the prosecution table. There were several people in the gallery area at the back of the courtroom, including the woman I presumed was his grandmother. Several people I did not recognize. A number of people I recognized as prosecutors or other attorneys. Mike, the bailiff, was in the courtroom near the magistrate bench. Magistrate Sanchez was reading a factual account of the charges. From the portion of the facts being read, I believe there were 2 charges of aggravated robbery or aggravated menacing that involved Mr. Haynes having held or threatened people at gunpoint. See right here, I don't know how that's relevant to why he shot this unarmed teen, but he throws that in there too. My understanding was that the prosecutor had offered to drop one of the charges in return for a guilty plea on the second charge. Magistrate Sanchez inquired of defense counsel if Mr. Haynes was going to accept the plea. Defense counsel said yes, but Mr. Haynes said no. Magistrate Sanchez asked if the defense was going to trial, and Haynes said he did not want to go to trial but wanted a better deal instead. Magistrate Sanchez decided to enter a continuance for the case. At that point, Mr. Haynes yelled, "This is BS," and he pushed his chair back and stood up. Mike the bailiff and I approached Haynes. Magistrate Sanchez told Haynes to sit down and that there would be paperwork needed to be signed, but the mother walked out of the courtroom, and it was clear to me that Mr. Haynes wanted to leave too. Okay. So his mom walks out of the courtroom at this point, and the kid wanted to leave too. Since I was the only deputy on the 5th floor, I radioed Franklin County Sheriff's Office Deputy Troy Speakman of Court Services Domestic Relations to come to courtroom 56 from wherever he was in the building in case the presence of another deputy was needed to control the situation. Mike instructed Mr. Haynes to sit down, but Haynes refused to sit and said, "F you, N-word," to Mike, who is black. I walked up to Haynes and touched his left shoulder while telling him that he needed to sit down. Now, I don't understand why he needs to sit down. Why is that he needs to sit down? I don't get that part. So he's standing in one spot, but he needs to sit down because the judge said so and you guys work for the judge? Is that how it works? I thought you uphold people's rights. Okay. So Haynes refused to sit down and told me not to touch him. Okay. So, but maybe you shouldn't have touched him. The only thing he was doing so far is causing a disruption with speech. He hasn't hurt anyone. He hasn't threatened to hurt anyone. He's standing in one place. Haynes refused to sit down and told me not to touch him. Both magistrate and I told Haynes that he needed to calm down. Now it's calm down. First it was sit down. Now he needs to calm down after he's been touched and approached. The mother had returned to the courtroom by this time and placed herself between me and Haynes. So the mom got between this cop and her kid. She told me not to touch him and indicated that she would deal with him. Haynes' lawyer signed the continuance form. Haynes said he was not going to sign that S, and Mike gave the form to the mother to sign, which I believe she did. After that, the woman who I believe to be the grandmother followed by the mother, and then Haynes started to walk toward the door leading out of the courtroom and into the outside lobby area. I followed them to make sure they were leaving. Okay, to make sure they were leaving. Why do they have to leave? Like leave completely? Make sure they were leaving. Were they told to leave? As we were about to exit, or just as we were exiting the courtroom, I heard someone, I believe one of the attorneys in the room, say something to the mother. The nature of the comment was that the mother needed to learn how to raise Haynes, but I do not remember exactly what was said. The mother looked at me and asked, "Who the F said that?" I told her it was not me. I instructed her, Haynes, and the grandmother to leave the building. Okay, so now he told them to leave the building. But once in the lobby area, they all turned left, south, away from the exit, and then east into a hallway towards do not enter, staff only, secured door. Toward a door, okay? So they're still in an area they're allowed to be in. Haynes was saying that it was me who had said something to his mother, and he was saying F you, F this, and F that N-word. While the grandmother was pleading for Haynes and the mother to leave, I instructed them that they had to leave. And the mother pushed me in the chest with both hands. So he's claiming the mother assaulted him. So I can't believe him, of course, because he's a cop. I would have to see dash cam or body cam footage of that. Okay, I again told them that they needed to leave, at which point the mother forcibly shoved me with both of her hands to my chest, which sent me backwards a few steps. At that point, I told the mother she was under arrest. My intent was to arrest her at minimum, disorderly conduct, and assault. As I approached her, she bladed her right side toward me and swung her right arm backwards to elbow me or strike me with the back of her right arm. I blocked her attempt to strike me and grabbed her by the shoulders to place her on. It's going good so far. To place her on the ground. But she pulled away from me as I began placing her on the ground. I was standing, bent over at the waist, as I struggled to put her on the ground. Suddenly, Mr. Haynes jumped onto my back from behind and began repeatedly punching, striking me on the left and right side of my head, face, and temples. I could not see him, but I knew it was him because he was yelling, "Don't effing put your hands on my mom." He was striking me with full force. I was off balance and leaning forward with Haynes on my back, and I felt Haynes yanking several times on my gun, which was holstered on my right side, and I believe that he was trying to take it from me. This is pretty convenient here. So, again, I would need to see body cam footage or some kind of footage of that, because you cannot believe a cop. I quickly used my right hand to hold my pistol in the holster, and as I began falling to the ground, I felt someone else crash into me from my left, knocking me to the ground. I believed at this time this was another attacker. I ended up on the ground face down. Or slightly on my right side, with my left arm over top of Haynes, who was on his back, and to my left, north. I believe that I still had my right hand on top of my holstered gun to try to protect against Haynes' attempts to take it from me. The person who I believe was the second attacker ended up on the ground to the right of Haynes. My left hand was sandwiched, pinned between them. I felt what I believe was Haynes' hand repeatedly tugging and jerking on the taser on the front left side of my belt, inches from my knife. I ordered him to stop and let go of the taser, but he continued pulling at it. I was dizzy, slightly disorientated, and I was afraid that I was about to lose conscious from the multiple head strikes, and that Haynes would get control of any one or more of my weapons. It is at the moment that I quickly unholstered my gun and fired a single shot into Haynes' left torso to stop the attack on me. I fired the shot using one hand, right hand grip. With my right arm bent at the elbow, across the front of my torso chest. I fired a shot while on the ground, and my target was the suspect's left side center mass. I believe I fired a shot at him with my gun in contact with his left side, or from less than a foot or so between the muzzle of my gun and his left side. The direction of my shot was north, but I fired slightly downward angle so that my backdrop would have been the floor underneath him. So he consciously angled the gun so it safely only killed him. After I fired, Mr. Haynes pulled his arms up towards his head, bent at the elbows, and began inching or pushing, I assume with using his legs, east while still on his back to the ground. The person on the ground, who I believed to be another attacker, got up. I recognized the person as someone I'd seen before, perhaps probation or parole officer. I reholstered my gun and immediately began to render emergency first aid to Mr. Haynes. I checked for a pulse and felt one. I used my hands to put pressure on the gunshot wound. I radioed that I shot someone for a medic to come to my location. I believe I radioed twice for a squad as I continued rendering aid. Deputy Speakman arrived a short time later and mistakenly thought the suspect was having a seizure and opposed to having been shot. I told the radio I had shot the suspect. Several other deputies also began arriving at my location. Yeah, they showed up to get all the other witnesses out of the room. I told someone to get an automatic defibrillator from my office, and I gave him the keys to the office to retrieve the device. Other deputies took over rendering aid to Mr. Haynes at FCSO. Deputy Kruger led me away from the scene. I proceeded to 375 South High Street and then to 410 South High Street while the scene was secured. I was then transported by ambulance to a local hospital for medical treatment for my injuries. At the time I fired my weapon, I was in fear for my life from an unarmed child. I believed that I was about to be rendered unconscious from the numerous head strikes Haynes had inflicted on me. I was concerned that if I lost consciousness, Haynes, the mother, or the person I believed to be additional attacker in addition to Haynes and his mother, would have access to my gun, taser, and knife, posing a deadly threat to me and anyone else in the courthouse. The only deadly threat in the courthouse was you, bro. You're the only one who's armed to the teeth, and your gang members. I knew that Haynes was facing charges involving his use of a gun. He was highly irate and unruly before the court hearing, during it, and immediately afterwards. Despite my instructions that he and his family leave the area, his mother physically assaulted me. I was in the process of arresting her, and Haynes then jumped on my back and attacked me from behind, nearly beating me unconscious, beating me to unconsciousness. He tried to take my gun. Then, when Haynes was on my back, someone else came in and knocked me to the ground. That was one of your own guys. Haynes had his hand on my taser and began pulling it to try to take it from me. He's repeating himself now. As he was pulling on the taser, his hand was inches from the handle of my knife on my duty belt, which I believe he could also easily access to stab me. I could not see the mother who had already assaulted me, but I believe she was on the ground somewhere near me as well, along with Haynes and the other person I believed was the attacker. My left hand was between Haynes and the other person I considered an attacker, so I only had one hand, my right hand, to fend off the attack. And no time did Mr. Haynes ever show any signs that he was intending to give up or comply with my commands, and he continued his assault on me until I was able to draw and fire my gun. At the time I fired my gun at Haynes, I knew I was seriously injured, and I did not believe that any other reasonable alternative protect my life or the lives of those within the courthouse from the deadly threat presented by Haynes' actions in viciously attacking and seriously injuring me, beating me, and trying to gain access to weapons he could then turn on me or anyone else with who he came into contact. This concludes my statement. Deputy Richard Scarborough, badge number 1188. I don't know if you saw yesterday's video, but you got to watch yesterday's video and then watch this video and then see, because his grandmother says he had the mother up against the wall. The kid came and touched, the grandmother says the kid came and pulled the cop by his shoulder, and then the cop instantly turned and started raging on the kid. That's what the grandma said, and then when the grandma said when they got him on the ground, his hands were up by his head and not reaching for anything. So I need body cam footage. I need more footage because this isn't cut and dry. There's two totally conflicting stories. So there you go. Thanks for watching. I need a glass of water. Please like, subscribe, join, click the bell, thumbs up. John's Coin Rings on Etsy. I love you. Peace, tranquility.